Good day, folks. From me, Chris Oteron. Welcome to this fifth session of this program. Hopefully you find it useful and that it stimulates thought around what tax managers should be doing in corporate environments. In the previous sessions, we looked at tax strategy, organizational strategy, policy, and how do you integrate all of this. All of that is just work on paper if you cannot execute. Now, the execution comes in procedure. Nobody loves or likes procedures, but it has to be there, otherwise the policies can never be executed effectively. What we will be doing in this session is have a very brief look at some standard policies. There are many examples in the material. You're welcome to have a look through that and adjust it for your specific circumstances. What we have prepared is very cryptic, but it demonstrates the point of departure. But let's just go back to the basic principles for a moment. If we have to create this structure or platform or framework, we have to start with understanding the risk. Then where is that risk applicable? What policy do you need to address that risk? And then what procedures do you need to implement and give feet and hands to the policy? We've dealt with the first three. Today we're going to look at examples of the fourth element. Now there's a typical example. Now if you look at that, it starts with your policy number, because it's always good to have a number dealing with your policies, so you can find it afterwards. What is the classification? Where does this fit in? Have you given that the necessary thought to that? Then the topic itself, then the policy. This is the policy, and then you have a procedure. How do you implement that policy? Now in this specific case, we can see it deals with VAT operations and risks, and operations and resources. Those are the main topics, and you would have seen that coming through in the previous sessions. What is the topic? Overall responsibility for the VAT compliance, an extremely important policy in an organization. Where does it stop? So the policy in this specific example is responsibility for the overall VAT compliance is centralized at the executive level. So that would normally be the tax executive for that level. But how do we put this into something which can be executed? The board of directors, so now we're pinpointing. In conjunction with the head of tax, must appoint an appropriate candidate within 6 months from the time that the position has become vacant. So that's a position in an organization that is so critical that it can't remain vacant. Now maybe you want to be a little less rigid, saying within 6 months or a reasonable time thereafter, because candidates might not be readily available, but that's your policy, that's your procedure, and you need to deal with how you want to implement that. And there's the policy owner, and that's the head of tax. In this specific case, it might also be the board of directors or the audit committee. But the bug has to stop somewhere. So there has to be a place where that responsibility is. Let's say the rest are just similar examples. Again, we're looking at VAT operations and risks. Then we're looking at reporting lines. How do you create a reporting line? So there's your policy. The executive responsible for the tax function, it reports directly to the corporate head of tax, which is not ideal, but in this case, this is what we've come up with, and to the audit committee, or it should be to the board of directors. Depends on what your specific policy is. How do you do that in terms of a monthly report that should be submitted? And if you haven't submitted your monthly report, you haven't complied with the policy, and that should have consequences. Then we're still busy with VAT operations and risks. We're talking about transparency. And there the transparency is this organization's policy is full transparency. And when there are defaults in terms of the procedure, then there has to be a process that says what will happen in the case of that there is no transparency. In this case, we said the VAT register must be maintained and outstanding risks and other significant issues reported in the monthly report to the head of tax. So now we're taking that to operations and say, Mr. Operational Resource, you are responsible because you do the transactions on a day-to-day basis. This is the manner in which the report must be prepared, and the tax manager will provide you with that. You must provide me with a monthly report, and that would include a report saying there is nothing to report. So, and where does that sit? It sits with the tax executive. The tax executive must make certain that the procedure is there, but the person responsible for the day-to-day operations must make certain that procedure is implemented in their area of operation. And then there's a last example, areas of non-compliance. Now, if you look at the procedure, we've linked the procedure to disciplinary processes. Maybe you don't want to be that rigid. Maybe you want to be a little bit more lenient in that area. But the outcome is there must be consequences for non-compliance. Now, if non-compliance is as a result of not having done your work, then there should be consequences. If it is simply something has gone wrong, then there should be a feedback loop that says, why has this happened? Let's make certain that it doesn't happen again. See how the process works. There are many, many more examples in your material, which you can obviously have a look at. In the next session, we will start looking at the roles, the soft issues, the roles of tax managers. What roles should they fulfill in organizations? And then we'll build on that in subsequent sessions on if these are your roles, what should your KPIs and KPAs be? So we'll see you in the next session.